What's up, whiskey lovers? Welcome back to episode number 3 of WhiskZ Talks, where we speak all things whiskey, from the people involved, from the farm to the mouth and everything in between. Today's guest is someone who's taken over social media by storm and created some very craft whiskey. Craig, also known as Crafty from Craftwork Distillery. Thanks for joining us, mate.
G'day, mate. How are you?
Very good. I'm a lot warmer than you by the looks of things.
Yeah, not wrong. I think it's going to snow tonight.
Snowing, and I'm worried about being about 14, 15 degrees here. So getting into things, it's something I always want to know. What is your current bottle of whiskey you've personally got open that you're drinking? Doesn't have to be your own, but what are you drinking at the moment?
Well, that's a really funny question because I am drinking my own. And there's a bit of a story to it though. This is the next release, which is coming out probably in July. And today I spent time breaking it down to the bottling ABV. So I haven't actually tasted it yet, and I've got it in my hand, and this is what I'm going to be tasting and drinking tonight. Get my head around it.
We get an exclusive. How awesome is that?
Yeah. I've got to taste it first.
Go for it.
Yep, cool. Carry on.
It will be one of my questions a little bit later on, I think, on there. So if people haven't heard your story and how you got into it, how did you become who you are in the whiskey scene? What was your first experience and then your story to being there? And obviously it's a very big one. Let's try and keep it down to as short as possible.
Basically, it started in 2007. A good friend of mine, actually earlier, a good friend of mine tried to introduce me to whiskey, a guy called Derek. And I hated it with a passion. He loved it with a passion. And we had many a night arguing over him trying to get me to drink whiskey. But unfortunately, in 2007, he passed away. And when he passed away, his family thought I was a whiskey lover. So they gave me a few bottles that he had at home, which I wasn't a whiskey lover at all. I didn't like it. But anyway, so I took the bottles. I was very appreciative. And then one night I opened them up, one after another. And it was the moment, and as I remember it clearly, it was the moment that I went, crap, this is like wine. They're all different. And it put me, it was the start of my journey of becoming inquisitive about whiskey, and then wanting to learn more about it. And I can be quite compulsive. And so I just sort of went off and started researching and learning and meeting people. And it went from there to eventually I managed to convince my wife, let me lay a small barrel of whiskey, let's see what happens. And to now I've got a little wee shed, 60 square metre shed at the back of Capity, back of a pub. It's 4 degrees and that's my still in the back. So it's a bit of a journey.
Yeah, well, from not enjoying whiskey or not appreciating and not understanding it to being a craft whiskey distiller, to me, it's one of the coolest stories I've heard for quite a while when it comes to whiskey. So you said that obviously it's all fairly new, and well, 2007 is still very new for everything. What's kind of some of the biggest lessons that you've learned through it, even some of the biggest mistakes that you've done?
I would say, this is going to sound a bit, not make sense, but it makes a lot of sense to me. So I'll explain it to you. I know what I know now, and I knew what I knew a year ago. And a year ago, I knew nothing. So a year from now, I'll know more. So in summary, it's a constant learning. It is unbelievable how much learning you can do, whether it comes down to the wood, the spirit, the process, the innovation on casks, the innovation on cuts, what you're doing with your barleys. There's so many things you can work with it, which is incredibly exciting. That's one big thing. Another thing I'd say is I've been very fortunate. I've been able to surround myself with very good people who know the craft very well, and they have helped me. They've cut down some of the mistakes because they've shared their mistakes. And so I haven't made those mistakes. I've made plenty of my own mistakes, that's for sure. And I've had a few distillers call me turkey brain because I do things when I've been told, don't do that. And I go out and do it and it doesn't work. So it's, it's a lot of learnings, surrounding myself with good people. And I know there's just so much more. And I'm really only just starting. I mean, I only started releasing products, independent bottling, the end of 2018. So I'm very, very new in the game.
So would it be offensive to say you're a new kid on the block, or you've been around long enough, you're no longer the new kid on the block, but new kid on the block to like selling whiskey and getting it out to the public, I guess?
Well, in Australia, the whiskey industry is so young, so young.
Yeah.
So I'm probably not a toddler. I'm probably an infant now, I'd say would be the way. And what I do say is I don't call myself a distiller. I put myself on a 3-year self-imposed apprenticeship. So later this year, I'll come out of my own self-imposed apprenticeship. I think a butcher doesn't pick up a man doesn't pick up a knife and cut meat and call himself a butcher. So I think the same thing with being a distiller. So later in the year, I'll say yes, I'm a fully fledged distiller, an infant, but I'm still a distiller.
One of the things I put up in one of the Facebook groups a little while ago, and it was related to a question that I had from my partner. My partner just asked me, is there such a thing as I'm going to say the word wrong, a whiskey sommelier? So the wine sommelier is that, pair everything and know everything about whiskey. I put it up on the group. Yeah. Everyone ripped it up and said there is no such thing, and you can't just go to a course and learn whiskey and stuff like that. And a couple of the people that are also distillers that have been into this industry for like 20 plus years and travel all around the world from it, even they said there's no way you can do it in a course. Every single day, they've been doing it for 20 plus years, they're still learning something new. And it would be an interesting game to get into, and I don't think I'll ever get there, but I think it's too much learning and too much experimenting for me. I'd be afraid to make too many mistakes on it. What's probably the funniest or most interesting mistake that you've made, if you'll tell us?
Nice. Oh, okay. Yeah, I know what it was. Okay. So my shed is a 60 square meter shed, and it's at the back of a pub. So there's all grass around the back of the pub. And anyway, so I needed to get a little crown lifter into my shed so I could move barrels around and containers, IBCs and things. So that's all well and good. And so I measured the doorway, measured everything up. Yep, it's all good. I found a crown lifter, secondhand, all good. I ordered it and they delivered it. And they dropped it off on the grass right in front of the shed. And I go, why'd you do that? And they go, it doesn't fit. I was about 15 mil out on my measurements. So I could not get my crown lifter into my shed. It was actually one of my first Facebook posts about Craftworks Distillery, about what a dickhead. This is the start of the journey. So
and that's the hard part about it. You've got to learn, and if you learn off your mistakes, well, it's probably an expensive mistake to learn off, but hopefully it all sorted out for you.
A local did. A local with a grader picked it up, turned it on its side, and we dragged it into the shed. Oh. So it's all good.
So
I can't get it out, but it's in at least.
You've got to dismantle the shed now to get it all out. So, so say if you're you're in the middle now of currently making some product, what's an average day / week? Now you've been at the shed for a few days, I think, from my understanding from our conversations. What's kind of the average week when you're actually making the whiskey?
Okay, so I live in Sydney. And my distillery is in Kapiti, which is 3.5 hours west of Sydney. So I come down to my shed probably 3-4 days a week on average. And I'll come down, and when I'm in cycle, I'll be doing brewing, doing a brew once a week. I will be doing a low wines run, a wash run once a week, and possibly prepping barrels, cleaning. Yeah, and that's about it. And bottling. And the rest of the time I spend in Sydney, and Craftworks is very small, and I am sales and marketing. So I'm the guy that goes around to bars and introduces and does tastings and things like that. But yeah, like this weekend just gone has been really good. I have friends that come down occasionally, particularly Todd, very much my right-hand man. And this weekend we did double rum ferment. We did a rum wash. We prepped a barrel. We did some barrel tasting, as you do. And today I filled a barrel. So it's been a pretty full-on weekend.
So
and then when I'm here, I do Salador if I'm here.
Yeah, so I saw a post today that you're getting a little bit closer to the pub reopening out the front. You want to give us a bit of information about that place?
Yeah, that's really exciting. It's really exciting because they've been doing a lot of renovations. It's a very old pub. It was built in the 1900s and in the 1800s, sorry. And it's an old historic pub, and it's got a really nice feel. It's all all sandstone, and it's got big fires. So in winter, it's just the perfect place. But what's happening with the changes is I'm going to very much have a solid presence in the bar. So my plan was to have an extension of a cellar door at the bar. So there'll be all the current Craftworks releases. There'll be bottles that you can no longer get. I'll be putting them on the bar. So it'll be the only bar in Australia that'll have the comprehensive, almost complete collection. And we'll be doing cocktails and a whole lot of other things. So we're on the Castlereagh Highway, and there's quite a lot of tourist trade that comes through. So it's going to be very, very good because it gives me an opportunity to really connect more with the tourist side. And when I'm here, the roller door's up, and I have my cellar door here as I'm working away. But with the pub opening up shortly, yeah, looking forward to it. Really are.
Well, that's good. And obviously, hopefully, COVID issues and restrictions and stuff like that are kind of...
Oh, absolutely. We had a big camping trip planned in March. It was to coincide with another release. Did it last year with Black Soul Beast, and we were planning on about 90 to 100 people. We were so looking forward to that camping event. But yeah, of course, when COVID hit, life changes for everybody.
There was a lot of things. The whole reason why I started my whiskey reviews, I did 31 Australian whiskies in 31 days, including yours. Thank you again for that.
No worries.
Down to Tasmania for this Tasmanian Whiskey Week. It was going to be my big trip that I do every year. I normally go away for a month overseas. I was going to keep it local and go to Australia. And obviously COVID's absolutely stuffed that for us. Talking about COVID and going through what other people do, and you don't do what other people do. I get that, and I appreciate that because I'm exactly the same. I don't do whiskey reviews like everyone else does. I'm not, as some people say, whiskey wanker. If I don't like something, I'll say it. You cannot sit there and like 100 whiskies and say they're all amazing nines. You just can't do it because it's not happening. So you do things differently, and I appreciate that. But the big question is, why didn't you do, under the COVID thing, like a virtual tasting set? Because you've obviously got some releases that were all ready to go. Obviously, a lot of these big brands did, virtual tasting things, and there's plenty of them up in the background here that I did. What was it behind the reason? Was there even a thought, or was there a restriction on doing it?
No, it's a very good question. I think it was quite a few factors that contributed. So number one, we released we did a dual release. So Tokay OK and Grumpy Old Man at the same time. Yep.
There you go.
That's it. That's the babies. And so to pull that together takes a lot of effort, a lot of energy. And we were behind the eight ball from a timing perspective, because like everyone else, when COVID hit, we sort of just went under the sheets and hid. It was like, well, what are we going to do? How's our business going to survive? So yeah, got out from underneath the sheets and refocused and thought, right, okay, we've got to push through on Tokay OK and Grumpy Old Man. So a lot of energy went into that. Then the Capity, which is the cellar door release, decided to release that as well. That's it.
One
So
of
it
my
was
favorites.
that's it. There was 3 releases at the same time, so a lot of energy went into that. Had some discussions with fellow distillers about doing some online tastings and Zoom sessions and that, which we have and we still might. It's just there, everyone's just running around, everyone's focusing on different things. I didn't go the line of sanitizer. I decided that was not for me. I mean, that thing is a pot still. It does not make sanitizer. It is not an efficient piece of gear for it. So I stayed away from it. But what I also did is I implemented a new strategy, which was support your local craft whiskey. Hold on a second, I'll get a bottle.
So his understanding of supporting local is exactly what I've done. I've just done this.
2 seconds, nearly here. So
there we go.
Which is a 50 ml bottling.
Yep.
And that's my reaction to COVID. It's like, well, people are drinking at home. So this is a way that people can have an experience of a craft whiskey for $20, $22. And if you're going to a bottle store and you're buying your bottle of imported Scotch, hey, pick up a little 50 ml and away you go. So I put my energy into this, as opposed to going online and doing Zoom sessions. But that's not to say that we won't, because I've been doing a lot of Zoom sessions and enjoying it like everyone else. Some of these sessions, talking to international distillers and that has just been fantastic. I did one the other day with the whiskey list with Westwood, which was a great US, American single malt. So yeah, that's the short answer.
Yeah, I think obviously in my industry, I'm not in the whiskey industry. That's kind of my dream to be. But in my industry, everything's kind of changed. I'm in real estate and everything turned to video content. I was luckily doing video content beforehand, but talking to clients, talking to buyers, we'd be on Zoom and going from there. I actually kind of think, and I actually be careful how I say this because I know COVID's affected so many people. The changes that we've done as an industry, in my industry and whiskey industry, have actually been to the benefit, because now we're tasting whiskies with some of these whiskey distilleries that we would never have tasted before, and we're becoming a different kind of community. So
absolutely.
I don't want that to stop. So if someone does a release, I kind of want them to be able to go, okay, do your big event, but then let's do an online portal event as well, and actually then share it to more people, because not everyone can fly down to certain places and not everyone can enjoy it at the one night. So getting people together, and the Hobart Whiskey one, I think there was close to 100 people the other night on that one. I've never been to Tasmania for the whiskey stuff. So, being able to enjoy that, it's just been fantastic. So hopefully you guys do one. I think it'll be great for the business. But with your marketing strategy, as you said, you're the head of marketing. What's been your kind of push? You're very active on social media. And I'm going to be, this is polite. I'm not being rude about this. You're not very polished, but that's exactly who you are and what craft. You're not, and it's the same as me. You'll take.
Really? Hey, hang on a second. I'll just talk to the marketing manager about this. Did you hear that? Did you hear what he said?
But you're being true to yourself and being true to the brand and everything like that. So what's kind of the marketing strategy to get your brand known more now?
It's crystal clear to me. Crystal clear. So I have a term, humanizing the art of whiskey. So for me, it is very, very much about telling the story, and it's always been like that from the start of Craftworks. That lifter incident, that was a Facebook post that I got a huge response from. People could relate to it. So I try to make whiskey relatable, break down some barriers, and be very transparent and tell people what actually it is to make whiskey. And I built a good following through social media on that. That also working with just people not working with people in the industry, but sharing information and being part of the whiskey community is a big part of it. But I've now got to the stage where I'm trying to broaden my reach further. So obviously there's tourism opportunities as well, but everything centers around what we do is we make whiskey and we tell the story. So we're not making mass-produced whiskey. It's basically a barrel at a time, and there's a story behind each barrel. And yeah, and a lot of other Australian craft distillers are doing the same, for sure. I am probably the most prolific craft distillery on social media. I've had quite a few distillers tell me that. They go, how do you do it? And why do you do it? But it's true. I do spend a lot of time on social media. I love telling story. I love getting feedback as well. And it doesn't have to be positive. Sometimes people will say something and I listen to it and go, yeah, that's good advice. In fact, I had a fellow distiller tonight ring me up and was giving me some feedback on something which I was doing, and it was really good. It was really interesting to hear his point of view because it was different than mine. So I took it on board.
And that's the thing with whiskey. It's not, and I'm just opening up one now that I don't agree is my favorite in the whole lot because it's the Grumpy Old Man, and I don't like peated whiskey. Everyone's got you've seen. Everyone's got a different flavour, different taste palette, and the thing is, with whiskey, it's kind of what I like about it is that it's an experience. So for me, we will go out normally and we'll go to a bar and I'll go with my partner, I'll go with some mates, and we're having an experience with each other. And if the whiskey kind of has a story behind it, it actually means a lot more to us. And I think even some of the value of whiskey that I've got, some of the most expensive whiskey I've got behind me is something that's actually had a story behind it, and that's basically just valued from, I don't know, whatever. But I think that having a story behind the distillery and behind the people who do it and behind the whiskey just makes the whole experience a hell of a lot better. So yeah, I think you're doing it right. We met on social media, so I don't see any problems with it. And cheers to being yourself, because I don't think there's any other way to be.
Yeah, look, it also comes back to it's a very local story. It's a very Australian story. And like my still was built by a craftsman in Griffith. He's a good mate of mine. And so there's a whole story behind the still and how it was put together. And people love that story. The grain, I use Voyager Craft Malt, which is a New South Wales craft maltster. It's the same malt that a lot of craft brewers use and some distillers use. So there's a real local story there. And you have relationships with these people. So it's not a static bit of information that you're passing on. It's an evolving, because the relationship is ongoing, if you know what I mean.
So talking about your still, from my small amount of research, you started off with a small still and now you've upgraded to a bigger one?
No, completely wrong.
Completely wrong. Okay, not good information. Cool. There we go.
I didn't muck around. I didn't do any home distilling. And by the time I got an interest in it, I thought, I don't want to do it because I don't want to have any potential risk of not being able to get my liquor license, my license to distill. So I waited until I got this baby.
Okay.
But what I did is I learnt on other people's stills. So Mark Burns, who built this still, when I was looking to get a still and I was humming and hawing, didn't know what to do, he just said, Crafty, get your ass down here, spend a couple of days with me and get on the still, which was fantastic. And I learnt a lot. Another mate of mine, Marty, Riverbourne Distillery, I got on his still and I learnt a lot. I learnt a lot through Brian Hollingworth from Blackgate Distillery as well. Brian had a lot of my initial barrels in his bond store. He helped me out and just maturing in Mandurin. So yeah, it comes back to those people that I surrounded myself with.
So on that, have you been surprised? Question first, have you been surprised about the community coming in, being a new person and not knowing, and they've been like open arms, or did you already know a lot of these people before you got into it?
I think it was a gradual process. I started drinking whiskey and meeting distillers, and then developing relationships with some people. So a good example, as I mentioned, was Brian from Blackgate Distillery. I loved Blackgate whiskey, I still do. And I got to know Brian personally, and he became a good mate of mine. So as I went along on my journey, he was there every step of the way. But other distillers, I've just met through events. I joined the Australian Distillers Association, which was a good way to meet and network. Did that, and just over time, just got to know more and more people, and people started to respect what I was doing, with the independent bottling, and then when I moved into distilling. So, which is great. That was one of the reasons I got into the industry, was because of the camaraderie and just the sharing information. And a lot of people work on the basis that it's yes, it's a small industry and it's growing, and yes, there's a lot of distillers coming on, and it's getting a bit more crowded. But the pond is getting bigger and bigger, and we're all playing in different parts of the pond. So there's not any fierce competition between distillers that I can see at this point. It's still very, very cordial and collaborative in some cases.
I think a lot of the distilleries, and while you're saying there are a ton, and the research that I've just done, with my past month of doing the whiskies, is that I could have kept on going for another 3 months, 4 months, and still not have had every single whiskey in Australia kind of thing, or every single distillery. But when you look at the style of everyone's whiskies, they're generally, like, there's a few of them that are going to be very similar to each other, but there's a lot that are just completely different from each other as well. So the tastings are going to be good, and there's going to be different clients for it. One of the things I have noticed, though, is America is starting to pick up a lot on Australian whiskey. Just on Instagram alone, the Australian whiskey hashtag it's gone up like 400, 500% in the last year alone.
Wow.
It's a fairly big Melbourne brand, so Star Ward, because they've gone over. He's obviously now living over there and whatnot. But the hashtag is starting to become really big, and I'm really into analytics, is finding out, who's looking for what, and that's how I've grown my Instagram so quickly in a matter of less than a month. So while there's a lot there, I think that there's definitely a lot of clients, because there's going to be a lot of followers. You're talking about Blackgate. I haven't had Blackgate as an actual full bottle. I had one drink of it at a bar, and I've fallen in love, but I haven't had a chance to grab it yet. And so there's so much out there for us all to try and enjoy. What current projects are you working on at the moment?
Quite a few. So the current one is the next independent bottling in July. So it's going to be called Blue 01. And I won't tell you too much about the story, but it's a unique cask, put it that way. So that'll be in July. And I've put a line in the sand. So September 1 is my first release single malt whiskey that I've distilled in Capity in the shed. So been working on that project now. In fact, over the weekend Todd and I were doing some working on it, because it's going to be a vatting of a few casks. So we're working around on the blending of the vatting and the ratios. So that's really, really exciting. The next thing is switching into, I won't say post-COVID, but the new normal. The new normal from a bar, restaurant scene, from a market scene. So gearing up for that. And then the other thing is the 50 ml bottle strategy, and rolling that out. On top of that, did a rum just recently, which was meant to be the Christmas rum, but because of the fires, we couldn't do it. So we've got the rum done. And I'm sort of playing around with a distilling beer project as well, with keg beer that can't be used because it's starting to go off. It's getting too old, but you can distill beer. You can make a hopped whiskey. It's not straightforward, but it can be done. So yeah, that's something I'm looking at as well.
Yeah. So what is the ultimate cask? If you had unlimited money and you had any option, or what's the dream project, or what's some crazy idea of a cask that you would love to try?
I really love Armagnac.
Okay.
And I only discovered Armagnac in the last 5 years, but I really love Armagnac. And what I think would be really, really cool is to get an Armagnac barrel and not break it down, and refill it and let it mature, a slow maturation. I wouldn't do it with my standard mash bill, but I think that would make an incredibly interesting whiskey. So, yeah.
So were you a wine drinker before you got into whiskey, or was you not really?
Oh, well, I like my red wines. Definitely like my red wines. Shiraz, Cabernet, Cab Sav, that. Yeah, definitely like my red wines. And there's some particular winemakers that I really like. There's a winemaker in Mudgee, which is not far from here, called Peter Van Gent. And I've done some projects with him trying to get some barrels, but they're fortified, it's vintage ports. I've got a really amazing winery down the road called De Beaurepaire in Ralston. We're going to be doing some projects down the track as well, because I'm not far from the wine region. I'm about an hour from the Mudgee wine region. Yeah. So there's definitely a relationship between wine and whiskey, and with wine wood, you can do some interesting things.
Yeah, that's why I asked, because I never heard of Cape Tea before, so I had a look at the area and then had a look at what was around it and realised that it was a bit of a wine area close by. But also when you referenced before, that you realise that whiskey is kind of like wine. There's different flavours and some of that. I wasn't too sure if you're, an experienced wine drinker. I'm not. I don't drink wine at all. I think it's one of the worst alcohols out there. I'd rather tequila any day of the week than any wine. So that's just me. So how do people find you online? Because obviously, we want people to know about your product and buy your products and stuff like that. How do they find you online?
Okay, so the website is www.craftworker.com.au, and the Insta account is craft_worker. So there's a bit of a theme. I coined the term craft worker when I first started, because craft, you're making stuff, there is a craft here, and worker because of the physicality of it all. It's a very physical thing to make whiskey. So www.craftworker.com.au. That's the best way. But I'm also available in some independent bottle shops through Sydney, and a couple of onlines as well.
Yeah, we'll have to try and find a way to get you up to Brisbane in the bottle shops like that. So what's actually available at the moment? We've got the Cabe Tea, which is the second release. Quick question: what's the difference between number 2 and number 1?
Oh, huge difference. So the Cabe Tea is an ongoing release.
Yep.
And basically, when I exhaust 1, so Celador release 1, I switched to 2. Celador release 1, the new make spirit was from Riverbourne Distillery, so a good friend of mine, and it was I'm trying to think what it was now. It was a bourbon botrytis refill cask play around, and the second one, the new make, came from a different distillery, and it was a bourbon Chardonnay. So very, very different. Very different whiskies. Funny enough, though, you put them side by side, and there is a similarity between the two. You know that they've come from the same spot.
Yeah.
Which, even though they're totally different spirits and totally different barrels.
I've been given. Someone sent me a sample of number 1.
Oh, nice.
The other day, because they saw I reviewed yours, and they said I'll send you that one there. So you've got the Cabe Tea, you've got the Tokay.
Yep.
And then. Funniest names, Grumpy Old Man.
Grumpy Old Man. So the Grumpy Old Man is the peated one, the peated bourbon. And it's called Grumpy Old Man because the new make spirit came from a mate of mine, Marty Pye, Riverbourne Distillery. I call him the kid. He's the oldest distiller in Australia. He's 76, I think. And he's just got a really warped sense of humour. But every time I call him the kid, he goes, mate, I'm just a grumpy old man that lives on a hill. So that's why it's called Grumpy Old Man on a hill.
I'll ask how you got your names for it. Obviously, that's a pretty easy one to figure out. The Tokay AK, because that's a Tokay. It was the Tokay barrel, wasn't it?
That was a Tokay barrel, yeah. And I just had this vision of a parrot or a cockatoo going Tokay AK, Tokay AK. So that went on the bottle.
That's pretty cool. Well, mate,
so that's available.
I know.
And then there's a small amount of Rage, which was the previous release. Not a lot of Rage. Only about 6 bottles are left of that, I think.
Right. Well, jump online, everybody. Make sure you, as he's been saying, support local. It's one of the things that I started on this journey, 31 Australian whiskies in 31 days. Crafty, thank you so much for joining me. I know you've got a fair bit to do tonight before you head off tomorrow. Again, thank you for your time, mate, and we'll speak with you soon.
Cool. Thanks, mate. I enjoyed it. Look after yourself.
See ya.